Can a simple rear suspension save an entire season? Ferrari believes yes. And you? Ferrari faces the 2025 season with a reality that no one in Maranello wanted to face. SF-25 has been a technical, structural, and strategic failure. What began with optimism after a competitive 2024 quickly became a downstream race. After 12 rounds of the championship, Ferrari has been relegated to a secondary role. In cold numbers, 222 points compared to McLaren's 460 reflect an alarming gap. But the data alone do not tell the whole story. To understand why the Scuderia is so far from the top, you have to thoroughly dissect what has failed in its car. From the first laps in Bahrain and Australia, Ferrari engineers noticed serious inconsistencies in the dynamic behavior of the SF-25. Although on paper the design followed the SF-24 line, the introduction of a reconfigured pull rod rear suspension was the first big concept error. This system, which was supposed to improve tensile and aerodynamic performance in rapid curves, ended up showing a critical structural weakness: its excessive flexibility. The car could not maintain a stable aerodynamic platform under load, which completely destabilized high-speed driving and compromised the efficiency of the flat background. This failure caused a domino effect. The SF-25 could not operate in its optimal window. To avoid the risk of disqualification due to excessive plate of the iron, a titanium block under the car that cannot be eroded more than 1 mm according to Ferrari regulations had to raise the height of the car. This decision protected against technical sanctions, but sacrificed aerodynamics in each lap. The direct consequence was a loss of curve load and a drastic increase in tire wear. We saw it in races like China, where Hamilton was disqualified by excess wear, a symptom that confirmed the lack of control in the stiffness of the system. The problem did not stop there. Another devastating aspect was the narrow operating window of the car. While McLaren and Mercedes could adapt their cars to different paths with some flexibility in their configurations, Ferrari was trapped in a single viable setup. If the circuit did not adjust to these specific conditions, the car became ungovernable. This technical limitation forced engineers to make decisions committed to multiple classification and career sessions, and every time they were looking for aggressiveness, the car responded with instability or subwiring. The most critical has been the psychological impact. Charles Leclerc, who came from a solid 2024 season, has had to modify his driving style, compensating for the lack of stiffness with a more conservative driving, thus losing his natural advantage in the passage through curve. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, still in his adaptation stage with Ferrari, has been doubly penalized by a car that does not offer confidence and for a technical environment in which he cannot exploit his previous experience. In interviews, he himself has admitted that he thought that adapting to SF-25 would take less time, but the reality of the car forced him to rebuild his pilot references from scratch. The SF-25 is not just a car that does not win races. It is a machine that has failed in the most elementary, to provide confidence. Each strategic error, each change of forced configuration, each disappointing classification, has accumulated a pressure that has translated into human errors, loss of rhythm in the race, and a growing internal tension. Ferrari is not just losing races. He is wasting time, resources, and perhaps the most worrying, the moral of his own structure. The new rear suspension that Ferrari will test in Mugello is designed to attack three fronts simultaneously: structural stiffness, control of the height of progressive management, and response to the loads. Technically, it incorporates a reprogrammed kinematics with new anchoring points and revised geometry, which allows suspension triangles to work in harmony with the flat background and diffuser. More rigid and light composite materials have been used, looking for greater resistance without penalizing the weight. In addition, elastic elements have been emphasized to avoid the sinking of the car at key moments, such as intense braking or passing for curbs. This last part is vital, since one of the great headaches of the SF-25 has been its inability to absorb pianos without losing stability. What Ferrari expects to win with this solution is not abstract. The objective is quantified: 3/10 by return. It is not a smaller figure. In modern Formula One, where technical parity has narrowed to obsessive levels, that gain can make a difference between Q2 and pole position, between a fourth place and a podium. But that gain is not guaranteed. The simulation team in Maranello has projected that improvement under ideal conditions. The big question is how this suspension will behave in real track conditions, where temperature, where variables, and dirty aerodynamics can completely alter expectations. In addition, this redesign implies remaking much of the base adjustments of the SF-25. The aerodynamic balance will change, which will force pilots to modify their braking references, their traction points and their way of attacking the curves. McLaren has worked side by side with track engineers to design new setup tools that allow the car to adapt to different circuits without sacrificing the operational window. This point is crucial because one of the largest deficits in the car has been precisely its conceptual rigidity. It could only work in extremely specific conditions. If the new suspension fulfills its promise, that bottleneck would disappear. However, not everything is optimism. There is an implicit risk in introducing such a complex solution in the middle of the season. Each new component must be validated not only by its mechanical performance, but for its integration with the existing systems of the car, including DRS, brake cooling, thermal management of the gearbox, and the behavior of aerodynamic flow. An incompatibility on any of these fronts could generate secondary problems that ruin any planned gain. Ferrari has already lived this before. In 2023, an update at the flat background resulted in a problem of overheating rear brakes that compromised 3 consecutive races. In this context, Mugello will be more than a simple weekend of test. It will be the real-time laboratory where Ferrari must demonstrate that it still has a reaction capacity. If the suspension works as planned, it will mark a technical and psychological inflection point. But if it fails, the team could be trapped in a spiral of adjustments and countermeasures that will consume resources, time and opportunities in a season that no longer allows errors. Ferrari's decision to completely redesign the rear suspension of the SF-25 is not a simple technical evolution. It is a conceptual redefinition of its car in the middle of the season. This movement implies much more than a mechanical modification. It is a total commitment that can, at best, rescue what remains of a disappointing year, or worst, drag Scuderia to an even deeper crisis. Maranello's team is walking on a tightrope in terms of planning, resources, and time. This is not an update like those that are normally carried out in the wind tunnel. It is a reconstruction of one of the fundamental axes of the dynamics of the car. And like any reconstruction, it can generate new fractures if it is not executed with surgical precision. The calendar does not play in favor of Ferrari. With half of the season consumed, each race without strengths is an irreversible setback in the fight for the construction championship. McLaren has escaped, and Mercedes has positioned himself again as a real threat. Red Bull, despite his own problems of internal structure and change of pilots, remains a dangerous contender with Max Verstappen at the wheel. Ferrari cannot afford more weekends without performance, but at the same time, he cannot rush the implementation of such a complex technical solution. The dilemma is clear. If they expect too much to prove the suspension, they could not have room to capitalize it. But if they try it too soon without having validated all its implications, the car can become ungovernable. There is an aspect that is little discussed, but that has a direct impact on the success or failure of this update. Synergy between aerodynamic, dynamic vehicle and career strategy departments. A suspension change directly affects how the car generates aerodynamic load, how it transfers weight into braking and accelerations, and how tires wears out. All this alters the simulation predictions that strategists use to build their career plans. If these data are not updated correctly or interpreted badly, track decisions can be based on wrong cases, which would lead to strategy errors that would counteract any technical improvement. In addition, the parallel development of the 2026 car is already underway. Engineering resources are divided. McLaren, no matter how a key figure in the redesign of the SF-25, is also in charge of drawing the base architecture of the next chassis. If this suspension is not effective or worse, it introduces unexpected problems. Next year's project could be born with inherited vices. Ferrari's recent history is full of examples where the urgency of the present contaminated the future. As if that were not enough, the human factor cannot be ignored. The media pressure on the equipment on Leclerc and Hamilton is reaching critical levels. Hamilton, in particular, has been the focus of attention since he announced his surprising signing by Ferrari. What should be a glorious return to the fight for titles has become a technical odyssey. If the suspension does not work, the criticisms will soon point directly to the technical leadership of the team, questioning the direction of Frédéric Vasseur and the role of Sarah. The narrative would change an ambitious team to an organization that improvises aimlessly. If the SF-25 gains consistency, speed, and control, Ferrari would not only recover competitiveness, but would send an unequivocal message to their rivals. They can still respond under pressure. The development of the rear suspension would become a case study, a demonstration of technical resilience and strategic audacity. The 3/10 that promise could be the difference between closing the year with dignity or writing another chapter of frustration. In Formula One, the margins that separate the success of failure are microscopic. 3/10 per round can transform a car that was like the third or fourth team of the platoon into a podium contender. Ferrari knows it, and that's why he has put all his cards on the table with a decision that has no return point. The eyes of the world will be put on Mugello, not only to see if the suspension works, but to assess whether Ferrari still has the ability to get up. And now it's your turn. Do you think Ferrari has found the key to reverse his fate, or do you think this suspension is just a momentary illusion? Leave it to the comments.